Well, in case you haven't noticed, the Nashville Predators aren't in the postseason this year. What went wrong? David Poile thinks three specific things led to the Preds being out of the playoffs this year. Do we agree? And do we think there are other big reasons the Pred missed their mark? We'll talk about it today on the Locked On Predators podcast.
Your Locked On Predators, your daily podcast on the Nashville Predators. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for making Locked On Predators your first listen of the day every single day. We are your free daily Nashville Predators podcast, available to you wherever you get your podcast and on YouTube. I'm Nick Morgan. I'm a writer at Penalty Box Radio, and I have a partner in crime.
You do. I'm Ann Kimmel. I'm a writer at InsideThePreds.com.
Also want to mention today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, Preds talk coming up today, but I want to start with something that's kind of jarring that I just learned about moments ago, and that is my dear friend Ann Kimmel there on the other side of the graphic, absolutely despises the Kiss Me Stanley Cup commercial. Despises with a passion.
With a passion. I almost have to change the channel for a couple of reasons. First of all, that song belongs in She's All That, and that's it. Like, that's where it belongs in that movie. But they take this song, and I don't even remember who sings it, but
Sixpence None the
Richer, where it's Kiss Me. And then they show, and I'm going to try to describe this without hurling. They show all of these hockey players putting their mouths.
It's okay. You can get through this.
It's so gross. Kissing the Stanley Cup after other people have touched it. Y'all, it upsets my stomach to such a profound degree. I saw it last night and I was like, this is the worst commercial that's ever been made.
Oh, I don't know about that. No.
If you won the Stanley Cup and you saw all those other dudes touching that Stanley Cup, you would kiss that when you got it.
They clean it.
Not when they're handing it or passing it around on the ice. No, they don't wipe that sucker down in between.
I think if you win the Stanley Cup, you could give a rat's ass where that cup was in. My favorite thing is like these, you know how they always show like Twitter pictures of like the day of like, you know, each player's like day with the cup.
Yes.
I like how like one day it's just like at a strip club. And there's just like women dancing all over it and people are throwing champagne. And then like 2 days later, there's like a veteran player whose kids are like eating ice cream out of the bowl. And it's like, okay, how much Lysol do you have to use to make that kosher?
It is not. There's so much. And I get it. Like, you're right. You win the Stanley Cup. You are just in the throes of ultimate joy. This is the most. I still wouldn't put my mouth anywhere near that thing. No way.
So, all right. So, you know, you're not going to have to worry about that this year, Ann. And you know why?
Why is that?
Because the Nashville Predators aren't going to win the Stanley Cup this year.
Very true.
They're out of the postseason. Eventually, everybody's going to get fed up with these transitions. And
I like it.
Turn those. Well, you do. I'm sure some of our people are like, yeah, let's move on with it. So here's the thing. Nashville Predators not in the postseason. We decided to look today at the three biggest reasons why we think the Nashville Predators missed the playoff this year. We say three biggest reasons because if we did every reason why, this would be a 5-6 part multi-episode series.
Minimum.
So here's where we got the idea, Ann, is that David Poile, very specifically, was asked this question. And he listed three things that he thought led to the Preds' downfall this year. Should we just go ahead and listen to him and then jump off from there?
Let's do that.
Let's do it.
First 50 games or so were not what we had hoped. Our goaltending was very solid with Juice and Kevin, but we're not producing 5-on-5. Our power play, which was so good a year ago, was really struggling. Last year, multiple players had career years, and most players were having trouble this year replicating that. Some of our young players that played so well were really having a tough time producing. So for me, it felt like every time we took a little bit of a step forward during the season, then we'd fall back. And I never really felt that these first 50 games that we were in the playoff race, we seemed to always be playing from behind or either on the scoreboard or in the standings.
Yeah.
Yep. Which is interesting to have David Poile come out and say, you know what, through that first stretch of 50 games, even I didn't feel like we were where we needed to be, because, you know, you don't hear that conversation in the moments that it is happening. And so I think the fan base through that stretch was left wondering, does he think this is working? He didn't.
No. So let's break through or break down some things one at a time here. Let's start with the 5-on-5 conversation. Let me just throw some stats out there for you. In terms of goals per 60, which is more or less goals scored per game, Predators 2.25 goals per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, sixth worst in the NHL, only ahead of the Blackhawks, Blue Jackets, Ducks, Wild, which that's interesting. Red Wings and then the Preds. So yeah, there's number one. Here's the interesting about that. Then you go to expected goals, which are, you know, based on your play, based on the shots you're taking, how many goals do we think you should score per 60 minutes? And the Preds did a lot better at that. 2.59. Just counted. It's 13th from the bottom. But that's like more than the Rangers, more than the Wild, just one spot behind Colorado and one spot behind Vegas. And this was all at 5-on-5. So what that tells me, Ann, is the Predators, and we have talked about this before, the Predators got a not great, but decent amount of chances at 5-on-5.
Yes.
But couldn't put the puck in the net. Where's the finisher?
Yes. And this is something that you and I have had to kind of wrestle with throughout the season. And as we look back, now that it's the postseason, where is the finisher? And it's interesting to me that Nashville, they're not taking terrible shots when you kind of look at shot maps. You know, it's not like this is all perimeter action. They're getting some decent chances, but they're not finishing in those areas, in those quality areas. If you look at, I love the website hockeyviz.com because it's pictures, and friends, pictures are my friend. Yeah. But they have a chart here about Nashville's finishing. And if you look at where they need to get better at finishing, friends, it's in the high slot. It's in those high danger areas. And so, you know, generating chances, but my gosh, we come back to this same thing. Where is Nashville's finisher?
That's a great question.
Where is he?
He's playing for the Seattle Kraken right now.
Stop it. Stop it.
I won't. I won't go there. You know, and it's interesting, Anne, because we look at those stats and it's one of those things. It's like, okay, should we look at this in the optimistic view and be like, you know, hey, the Predators, the numbers actually showed, you know, they were getting some good chances on net, but just, you know, couldn't get the puck past? Or should we look at this in the negative view and, you know, look at all these quality chances, you know, the Preds players squandered? I think there might have been 3 expected goals on that one play where Mikael Granlund had the breakaway and just passed it behind him to a sea of 4 defenders. Maybe that's something, but it's interesting because I feel like you can look at it either way and just be like, you know, hey, the Preds they're on the right track. They just need, you know, somebody to finish these chances. Or you can look at it as like, well, you know, the expected goals numbers weren't great anyway. And look, they couldn't even do anything with the chances they did have.
Yeah. And, we're optimists. And so there's a part of me that remembers there were several games through the stretch before the trade deadline where the Nashville Predators really did run into hot goaltenders, where they had some shots that were high quality chances where they just were UC Saros by somebody not named UC Saros. So the optimist in me wants to say, hey, look, remember we ran into some hot goaltenders down the stretch. But at some point in time, you need consistent finishing. And where some of these problems were, I don't feel like you can necessarily chalk that lack of finish up to injuries, because you had Matt Duchene for the first stretch of the season. You had Filip Forsberg. You had Roman Josi. Why weren't these shots put in the back of the net? And what do the Predators need to do this offseason to address it? Is it a personnel issue? Or is it the players we have are generating quality chances? Now they have to figure out how to finish them. I mean, how much of a change do the Predators need to make this offseason to make this finishing problem go away?
That's certainly got to be front and center to me. And, maybe you swing big this year. Maybe you just hope that, hey, Filip Forsberg coming back healthy, Matt Duchene back healthy, and Ryan Johansson back healthy, combined with the healthier Roman Josi, are going to come in here and mix with the guys who did get hot at the end of the season, like Tommy Novak or Luke Evangelista or some of these players. Still going to be a big question of whether Luke Evangelista is going to start on the NHL roster next year.
Lots of Big Macs in the offseason, Luke. Lots of Big Macs. Pack on the pounds.
Yeah, that should be interesting. That's for sure. But yeah, I mean, that's, to me, I think a big hole the Nashville Predators are going to fill. And we talked about that a little bit yesterday. More reasons why David Poile thinks the Nashville Predators did not finish the season well. He mentions the power play. That is certainly a big one. He mentioned star players underperforming. That's certainly a big one. We're going to break down the reasons why we think those things didn't quite come to fruition in 2023. And we're going to talk about, maybe is there another reason, a fourth reason that the Nashville Predators failed? That's coming up in just a second. But first, want to mention today's show is brought to you by Game Time. Anybody who likes going to sporting events at the last minute has probably done this before. You want to go to a sporting event. You want to go to a concert. You want to go to a comedy show. You're struggling to find tickets. You don't know. Is this in the upper bowl? Why is this more than the lower bowl? Are these good seats? Can you see the stage? Why are there $300 worth of fees on this $20 ticket? Nothing makes sense. It just gets super stressful, and it makes you not want to go to the game or concert or whatever. Well, screw all that. Use Game Time instead. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. And they have killer deals on last-minute tickets, and they give you your best price guarantee. So you can stop stressing over your tickets and start getting hyped for all the fun you'll have. You don't need to plan for months in advance. Game Time has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. And they have exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, and more, including hockey. The Game Time guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section or row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. It's the fastest growing ticket app in the country for a reason. They give you images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. And tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply again. Create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, and we're talking about the three biggest reasons, according to David Poile, that the Nashville Predators missed out on this year's postseason. The second one he mentions, oh boy,
Yeah.
The power play, Anne.
Yeah.
The power play.
The lack of power play is what we had. So to put it in context, let's go back a season and look at the 2021-22 season. And this power play was at 24.4%. Nashville Predators were towards the top of the league in converting on the man advantage. Things were going well. We had Matt Duchene. We had Filip Forsberg. We had Ryan Johansson. We had Roman Josi just cranking out power play goals, power play points. Transition to this season, and the Predators finished the season at 17.3% on the power play. Y'all, that's terrible. I mean, I could give you statistics and all that, but let's just talk about what's real. That's terrible. And what is so interesting to me, Nick, is that personnel-wise, it doesn't seem like there were a ton of changes on the power play to start the season. So,
no.
What the flag nog?
Well, and that's kind of the most jarring thing is that we went into the season looking at that power play, noticing they had the same personnel, and we were all like, "Oh yeah, they're locked and loaded. They finally figured out the problem. There's finally guys that they have chemistry with, so we're not going to have to do the line juggling or shuffling all season long." And then just those same guys couldn't really perform. And, here's the jarring thing to me, Anne, is just how bad the puck possession was.
Yes.
When the Predators had the man advantage. You want to have the puck. You want to control. You want to win that opening face-off. Get possession of the puck. You shoot, you miss the net. You want to have forecheckers that go and just pry that puck back away from that defense. Or you want to pinch enough that, the defense is able to keep the puck in the zone. We've seen this before, just this suffocating, power play where the same, 4 penalty killers are stuck on the ice for, 2-3 minutes at a time that they can't get off because, the second they try to go out of the zone, it's an odd man, the other way. Yeah. The Nashville Predators can never do that. They could never seem to get any of those long sustained power plays going. It was always kind of the same thing. It always seemed to me that like every Preds power play was, the Preds got the puck. They would go in, they would set up a couple of really good passes, some good movement. One shot goes off the boards or, deflected by the goalie, goes off in the corner. Defense clears it.
Yes.
All right. Here come the Preds back the other way. They can't get out of, can't get it in the zone, transition, puck goes back. Preds get it again. Dump and chase from the corner. Preds lose the puck battle. Puck down the other ice.
Yes.
Power play over. That just seemed to be the story for every Nashville Predator power play this year is they just could not hold on to that puck.
Yeah. And UC Saros sometimes had the puck more than anybody else on the Nashville power play, trying to get it ready and start all over. Another thing that I noticed early on was how challenging it was for Nashville to get the puck into the zone. They just opposing teams would stack that blue line and Nashville was befuddled. And like you said, sometimes they would then dump and chase, but they weren't winning that. And so you just couldn't reestablish zone time. What I think is so interesting, and I noticed this kind of right away, is especially with Tommy Novak towards the end of the season when you had some of these younger players coming in and the power play began to look like who's available. Give me 5 guys that we can throw on out there. And one of the things I noticed, especially with Tommy Novak, but I also noticed it with Luke Evangelista, they are YOLO when it comes to entering the zone.
Yeah.
There was no hesitation. There was no, oh gosh, I don't know, should I dump it in? Should I not? I mean, Tommy Novak especially charged those penalty killers at the blue line like a bull looking at a red cape. Just no fear, being more aggressive, taking it into the zone. Luke Evangelista was the same way. I felt like when Kiefer Sherwood was on the power play, this is a guy that was winning some of those battles against the boards. So it looked better towards the end of the season. I don't necessarily know that they capitalized on it, but at least there was something to cheer about. Like, hey, look, we're in the right half of the ice. This is amazing. Yeah. But there was such hesitation in reestablishing possession in the zone and in carrying it into the offensive zone. It was baffling to me.
And here's, you mentioned something. Let's go back to natural stat trick for a second. So let's go to expected goals against while the team is on the power play. This is basically how many goals the other team is supposed to score against you. Predators had 1.4 expected goals against per 60 minutes of power play time. That is the second worst in the entire NHL. That means the Predators were the second worst team in the NHL at giving up high quality chances when they had the man advantage. And how many times did we see that this year, Ann?
Yes.
Where, all of a sudden, hey, the Predators are on the power play and there's a 2-on-1 for the shorthanded team.
Yes.
Like, how many times? And that, to me, like UC Saros, even if he closes the door, like even if he makes a big save and everybody's like, whoo, that was close, that's 20 seconds of your man advantage time gone.
Yes, just gone. And here's the other thing that I always think about when you get a 2-minute power play. The effects of a power play, and we're seeing this in the playoff games, we're seeing this in real time with some of these other teams. The effects of a 2-minute penalty carry on much longer than that 2-minute man advantage. This is an opportunity for momentum. This is an opportunity to generate, threatening offense. And what we saw often with Nashville, like you said, is high danger chances for the other team. And that just gives momentum to the opposite team. And Nashville gave up the benefit of the 2-minute and 1 second opportunity because they just couldn't generate enough on the power play. Again, UC Saros may have been one of the busiest guys on the power play this season. Not good, friends.
No, and that's, to me, I think the biggest thing the Preds need to fill. They just, you mentioned it earlier, guys like Tommy Novak who kind of YOLO'd their way, which is, you're kind of taught, you go into the zone, you want to set up. So, you see guys kind of skate in the zone on the power play, stop, pass it back to their defense, set up for a play, maybe go in 1-on-2, chip the puck deep, that kind of thing. The Predators were always at their best. And there was a stretch, if you remember, kind of middle of the season, and where the Predators power play started getting really hot.
Yes.
And you watched, guys like Matt Duchene, and, the defense is expecting that chip. The defense is expecting that kind of stop, pass back, wait for your guys to catch up. You saw guys like Matt Duchene just, turn on the jets and go straight to the net, force the goalie to make a save or, to cover the puck. That's the kind of aggressiveness that works. Now, eventually you want to set up, like you want to be able to set up and get some play going. But sometimes if you see your chance, you just got to go for it. And it seems like that's when the Predators were always at their best.
Yeah. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how does the power play unfold. Now, of course, we still first have to get to how is this roster going to unfold come training camp and the beginning of the season, because again, we don't have, this is a hard roster to predict going into next season. But when you look at who's available on the power play, automatically you think of Forsberg, you think of Josi, you think of Johansson, you think of Duchene. But have players like Tommy Novak done enough? Tyson Barrie came in and ended up being a really important piece, kind of QBing that power play with Josi out. How are they going to stick with the old regulars, or are they going to mix up these power play groupings, these power play units? It's going to be very interesting to keep an eye on how much that is going to be shaken up when the time comes to kick off next season.
Well, let's talk about maybe some guys that are going to be on the roster next season or not. The third biggest thing that David Poile said contributed to lack of Preds success this year is that a lot of their big guns who had career years last year just kind of fell off this year. Now, I want to kind of clear up something, I guess, a hot topic of discussion in the Preds atmosphere, which is the Preds were foolish to think everybody that had career years last year we're going to do it this year. Like
Right.
that was kind of the big thing is, oh, well, of course the Predators couldn't do that. You really expected, these players to have the same year. Here's the thing, like Tanner Jeannot scoring 24 goals again. Okay, yeah, maybe that's kind of a far-fetched dream.
Mm-hmm.
But was it really far-fetched to think somebody like Filip Forsberg couldn't score 80 points again, or somebody like Matt Duchene, at one point considered, maybe one of the 10 best centers in the league? Was it really far-fetched to think he couldn't score, in the 80-point range again? Is it really far-fetched to think, Roman Josi, maybe he's not in the, flirting with 100 points, but it's not far-fetched to think he still can't be that high-scoring defender. So to me, no, I don't think it was far-fetched to think that guys like Duchene, guys like Forsberg, guys like Josi couldn't do the same thing that they did last year. Maybe the point totals are a little bit less, but the level of play, the amount of offense you're generating, it wasn't far-fetched at all to think that could happen again.
I agree with you. And we heard so much of that. Of course, they're not going to have another career year. And no, every player doesn't have a career year after career year after career year. But I agree with you. I don't think the expectations on Matt Duchene and Filip Forsberg and Roman Josi were too high going into the season. Now, statistically, agree with you. Are they going to hit those same benchmarks? Probably no. But is their performance and production going to be similar? And I feel like it wasn't ridiculous to say yes, their performance was going to be similar. You had Forsberg, Duchene, and Granlund start the season together. That was the combination last season. We talked about how important Mikael Granlund was for those, Forsberg and Duchene, those two to have their career seasons. Roman Josi, again, like you said, maybe not flirt with 100 points, but this is somebody who's going to generate offense while being a responsible defenseman, because that's what he does. So I don't think we are expecting too much of Duchene and Forsberg. And I don't think we should expect less than that going into next season either. Those expectations have to be high for those players. They didn't meet them this season.
No, and it's jarring how much the drop-off was. Filip Forsberg, 42 goals last year, 19 this year. He went from 84 points to 42, dead half of the points. And, a lot of people are saying, well, Forsberg was injured. Only 19 fewer games.
Right.
Like that's a 42-point difference in just 19 fewer games. Like that's bad.
A lot of ground to
regardless. Yeah, Matt Duchene only played 7 fewer games than he did last season. He went from 43 goals to 22, 86 points down to 56. Roman Josi, 23 goals down to 18, 96 points down to 59 points. In just 13 fewer games. And then I think, the one I think stirs the most conversation here is Ryan Johansson, 26 goals last year, 63 points, 12 goals this year, 28 points in just 14 fewer games. So
yeah,
that is, that's it right there. Like you lose a lot of offense from 4 guys you're building your offense around.
Yes, and those are your top players. Again, Poile says your top players have to be your top players. So much about these 3 issues that David Poile talks about is because that they are intertwined. This is one leads to another, but that one leads to another. And when you're talking about big players not coming up big, you have to look at things like their power play goals. Matt Duchene dramatically fell off on power play goals. His goal total would be very different if he repeated his performance on the power play. So that sort of plays into, why didn't your top players play well? Well, they weren't great on the power play. Well, why weren't they great on the power play? Well, then you wrestle, you got to wrestle into that. The same thing when you're talking about, why was 5-on-5 scoring so challenging? Well, your best players weren't your best players. Why? And so this is a hole that you have to keep digging in if you're Barry Trotz, if you're John Hines, if you're whoever the next head coach of the Nashville Predators next season will be. You got to dig to the bottom of that hole to get your answers, and you've got to start from there because these all are linked together, and you've got to figure out which came first, the chicken or the egg, and you've got to fix that.
That's the question is now who is around to fix that? Because we've had that conversation in prior years. Remember, we had a season in which everybody underperformed. Like Matt Duchene had 13 points in a season. Ryan Johansson was very bad. Filip Forsberg was way below his expectations. We've had this conversation with all of these players before. So the question now becomes, okay, is this just another bad year? Did something go wrong? Do we blame the injuries? Or do we have to stop and go, okay, these guys are in a decline. Maybe that one good year was the exception to what kind of players they are now. And if that's the case, then the Nashville Predators are in big trouble with how this roster is built.
They are, because you can't just move on from some of these big players. They're under contracts that are just not move onable.
Yeah.
And I come back to, we talk about 5-on-5 production. We talk about the power play. We talk about these top players not producing. And those were David Poile's 3 strikes against the Nashville Predators. But for me, I have to wonder, if you look really, really closely, are all 3 of those a result of something else? And are they a result of maybe players not buying in?
Okay. But if that's the case, isn't this the second coach that you've had that non-buy-in for? Didn't you fire Peter Laviolette because you felt like his players stopped buying in? Mm-hmm. If you're, every couple of years, if you're going to keep having coaches that you're not buying into, at one point you gotta stop changing the coach and go, okay, maybe we should just have some players that want to buy in and go all into what we did. And for, apparently they all did last year, and we saw what happened. Mm-hmm. Now it's like, I don't know. It's an interesting thing because, normally when you don't buy in, you start looking for them to go like back to bad habits or, kind of stuff. And I didn't necessarily see that. I mean, it's like you take the power play, for example. We remember the Peter Laviolette power plays where you would have like 10 shots on goal, but none of them were good.
Yeah, that's true.
Whereas, John Hines, when the power play was cooking last year, there was a lot of movement. There was a lot more kind of deliberate trying to get puck into high danger areas. I think they did more of that this year. They just made bad passes or couldn't get the puck. So I didn't see them necessarily going back to bad habits. Mm-hmm. I just saw them not being able to execute kind of what they're supposed to be doing now.
Yeah. I wonder, and like you said, I think it's interesting because when you say maybe there's not buy-in from the locker room, the automatic response is then you need to get a coach that they're going to buy into. But again, I agree with you. This is a road that the Nashville Predators have been down before with some of these core guys. So what is that going to look like going ahead? Because in those last 20 games where the Predators had these young players and they had some different veteran leadership voices in the locker room, you had some buy-in. That was something that John Hines mentioned. We've got buy-in from the healthy veterans in the locker room. What is he saying and what is he not saying but saying? And can you get this team after this season where they did not make the playoffs for the first time in 9 seasons? Can you get them all back on the same page and pulling in the same direction with these new young players? That's going to be the challenge for the Nashville Predators this offseason.
Yeah. It is going to be an interesting offseason. That's for sure. And I don't think the this past trade deadline is the last we're going to see of some of the Predators roster overall. So stay tuned, everybody, because it is going to be an absolutely crazy summer. Tomorrow, we are going to be doing takes from a hat. You guys know what this is. Just random off-the-wall topics surrounding the Nashville Predators or Stanley Cup playoffs. That is going to be tomorrow's show. And then on Friday, the Milwaukee Admirals. Remember them?
Go.
They are marching towards the Calder Cup, and we are going to have our prospects guru, Eric Dene from Penalty Box Radio, formerly of On the Forecheck. He's going to be on the show talking about some players to watch and whether some guys like Phil Tomasino and Luke Evangelista can reproduce their success they had in Nashville tenfold back in Milwaukee. So stay tuned for that. And where can people find your work?
You can find my work online at InsideThePreds.com. You can find me on Twitter at ANK_Mama on Ice.
You can find me at penaltyboxradio.com. Follow me on Twitter at _NSMorgan. Also, be sure to follow the podcast, LO_Predators, and subscribe. No matter what way you listen to us, whether it's via podcasting platform or via YouTube, subscribing really helps us out. That's going to do it for us on today's Locked On Predators podcast. Thank you, as always, for making us your first listen of the day. Back tomorrow with an all-new episode. We'll see you then.